Welcome to Passionately Moderate. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. Today is Wednesday, January 15th, and I'm here with El Presidente, Brett Shapiro, and we're going to talk NFL playoffs. Brett, say hello to our listeners.
How's everybody doing out there? Thanks for having me again, Mark.
I'm sure they're really excited now that you're here. So we have a big agenda here today that we're going to break all this stuff down with. The first thing that we're going to talk about is a recap of last week's games. We made a bunch of predictions. And shared our thoughts last week that we were all going to go over, and I want to see how those panned out. So we're also, later on in the show, we're going to break down the championship games that are coming up. We're going to give some gambling advice and some gambling perspective on that, and also talk about some interesting prop bets that are out there. And then we're going to, at the end, talk about the New York Giants offensive coaching staff and the potential impact on the team of hiring a new coordinator and getting some new coaches in there. First, we'll go to the Saturday game, January 11th. The afternoon game was New Orleans at Seattle. Now, we kind of differed a little bit last week on that. You thought the Saints had a pretty good chance in that game, or at least a chance, and thought they may have a run. I was heavy on Seattle. Talked about that defense, maybe one of the best defenses that we've seen. When I break that down, we break down what happened there. Well, what was your take on the game?
Well, the first thing was the line went off at 9.5 on this game. So Seattle wound up not covering the game. And in my opinion, if the game had a fifth quarter, New Orleans probably would have won that game. I was heavy on New Orleans last week, and they made a good showing. I think that it's pretty clear that Marshawn Lynch is the beast that we all thought he was. Seattle's defense is as strong as we thought they were. But there are definitely some questions with Russell Wilson. And there was definitely some questions as their receivers. They didn't have a single receiver that earned more than 30 yards. So, you were right. Seattle won the game, but there's definitely some big question marks heading into this week's matchup.
Yeah, that offense is in trouble. Russell Wilson's in a huge slump, 7 games now. Marshawn Lynch is the player we thought he was. But that Seattle defense held New Orleans to 0 points for 3 quarters. Now, I know they scored 2 touchdowns late, and they did make a game out of it, but it was an impressive showing through the first 3 quarters. Now, do you attribute that more to the Seattle defense or more to that weather that they were dealing with out in Seattle?
Well, I think I would attribute it to Drew Brees was not comfortable. I think the temperature, I think the noise, I think the wind. I mean, you could see on the punts that the ball was moving 3 feet left or right, depending upon what side of the field they were coming from. This was a great game. It was a little bit lopsided half to half, but this was a great game. It was a lot of fun to watch. And when Drew Brees settled down, he threw for 250 yards in the second half. So, he made a showing of it. And like I said, we'll get to it when we review the Seattle-San Francisco matchup. But I think that I'm going to have an interesting prediction for you this week.
Okay. And here's the thing, too. We had great games in the wild card round, right? We came out of that. 3 of those 4 games were awesome games. We didn't have that this week with the divisional round. This was probably the best game, but none of them were all entertaining. We had the 4 favorites. They all won convincingly. We know that. But they were not great games overall. And again, anytime a high-scoring offense scores 0 points through 3 quarters, it's definitely something to be desired in the entertainment department. The late game was Indianapolis at New England. This, to me, was the easiest game to call of the weekend. I was very confident that New England was going to win. All of us were when we talked about it last week. What was your assessment of the game?
The spread went off at 7.5, and New England won by 21, and it was really never in doubt from the first half on. Luck threw 3 really untimely and poor position field picks. And I think that, he's lived up to the hype, and I think he's had 2 solid freshman and sophomore seasons, but I think that he has a lot to learn. I think he grew up a lot in this game. He saw who he was and who he needed to be. If he was going to look in the mirror and stare at Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, he now knows, how you got to be in these situations. So he learned a lot. And then we learned also on the other side of the ball, Blount is a beast. We all saw he had some talent in Oregon, but now that it's his turn, I guess, or he's the flavor of the week, we saw he put up some massive stats, carried the ball 20-plus times, 150-plus yards, and he just looks like a beast.
Yeah, he went 24 for 166, and I'm not sure what's more amazing about that. The fact that Belichick has been able to reinvent this team again on the fly during the season and resurrect a career of a guy like Garrett Blount. I don't know if that's more amazing or the fact that, in general, it just seems like he can plug anybody in there. Is it about LeGarrette Blount? Is he that talented? Or is it just that here's the thing. So you and I are both in a fantasy playoff pool. We can pick 2 running backs from any of the teams, and you get points every week if their teams continue to go on. We both picked Marshawn Lynch. Worked out great last week. And we both went the route of picking a Patriots running back for our other running back, which was unheard of in this league. No one else did. Other people were picking LaShawn McCoy or, a lot of the other great running backs. Ryan Matthews was on a hot streak coming in. People picked all kinds of guys. No one was picking New England Patriot running backs. You picked Blount. I picked Shane Vereen. Now, obviously, that's worked out a lot better for you than it has for me, but we both saw the same thing coming into this which is that they're going to run the ball. They're probably going to win some games. They're going to stay alive, which is what we see, and they're going to run the ball. No one expected 24 for 166. And how many touchdowns did he have? 3 or 4? It was a crazy number.
3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns. Yeah. So, the team scored 6 touchdowns, right? And Brady threw none of them. 0 touchdown passes for Brady in that game, which also helped because I think a lot of the guys picked Brady as their fantasy quarterback for this competition. But anything else that you want to review with that game?
Well, I think that, you saw in the beginning of the season, Ridley was the quarterback. He put the ball on the ground a couple of times. The running back, excuse me. He put the ball on the ground a couple of times. And, it's something that Tom Coughlin is similar to, and it's probably because they learned it from each other, is, if the running back puts the ball on the ground, you give it to somebody else, and eventually they'll just learn. And I think that system seems to work. Now, who's going to be the flavor of the week next week? Will Vereen be back in the mix? Will Ridley be getting most of the carries? That remains to be seen. But we do know that, if you fumble the ball, you lose your job. And that's the way it should be, and it's worked out quite well for Belichick.
So one of the things that we sort of half disagreed on last week is, although we all picked San Francisco to win this game against Carolina, I thought Carolina had a better chance than you and Vinny did.
Well, let's talk about that. You mentioned before that all the home teams, the favorites, they played well, and Carolina didn't. And I think that you can look at the spread.
The favorites won, but not necessarily the higher seeds.
Well, yes and no. Carolina opened as the favorite. So, going into Saturday, Carolina was favored by 2. And the game actually at its height went off with San Francisco being favored by 2. So, that's curious. And there was really no doubt in my mind. I don't know anything special, but, except my eye test, San Francisco just has a lot more receiving weapons. Cam Newton has some growing up to do, being a leader and a role model and a team player there, dealing with those frustrations a little bit better. But Frank Gore had a solid game. Anquan Bolden went off. Crabtree was solid. I think that, that's going to suit them well when they play Seattle. And, they went off the favorite and they won pretty convincingly by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Cam Newton actually played pretty well in this game, considering I didn't think he had any help. Steve Smith was hurt. I think he got a shot before the game. He played well through the first half, but you could see the pain.
Caught one big ball for a touchdown, and then that was it.
But Newton went 16 for 25 for 267 yards. Kaepernick was only 15 for 28 for 196. Here's the biggest difference. The leading rusher for the Panthers was also Cam Newton, 10 carries, 54 yards. He had no help. The offensive line looked terrible. He was under fire. The defense came out to play. They played a very good first half. This game was a 13-10 game at halftime, but it never looked to me like Carolina was going to have enough on offense to really put it through, and they got shut out in the second half. And that 49ers defense, I think all year long was better than some of the numbers that we were seeing, and they out-toughed them. I mean, they were in their heads. I think Carolina became unraveled a little bit at certain points in that game, and as we talked about before the game, I picked the 49ers strictly on the fact that Harbaugh is, in my opinion, a much better coach than Ron Rivera up to this point. And I think that ended up being one of the major differences.
It definitely was. We don't know a whole lot about Ron Rivera. D'Angelo Williams, I mean, is he somebody that Carolina can continue to count on as the every down back there? What do you think?
I don't think anyone thinks that. I don't think anyone's looking at the running back situation in Carolina. I mean, they have a lot of very not that good running backs.
Right. It's been Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams, for 8 years. San Francisco has a lot of weapons. Kaepernick needed to prove a point. The Alex Smith battle that we talked about that still hasn't been settled in everyone's mind. They still think that was Alex Smith team last year. I think Colin Kaepernick still has some more to prove, and I think that a win this week against Seattle would set him up nicely.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And just to jump on that a little more, two things that I think really stood out to me about this game is, one, this is a different team with Michael Crabtree because you now all of a sudden have to use your best cornerback to cover him, and that allows Anquan Bolden to work against your number 2 cornerback. And as what we've seen is this guy is maybe the most clutch postseason receiver ever. The numbers are really scary when you look at that back when he was in Arizona. We saw it last year with Baltimore, and now he went 8 for 136 in this game. And all you hear his teammates talking about after the game and his coaches is that he's the toughest guy they've ever seen, any position. I remember that hit that he got hit in Arizona and broke his whole face. Kurt Warner let him into the end zone, and Kurt Warner wanted to retire over the hit. He was so brutal, and Bolden's back on the field a few weeks later. This guy's special, and he brings an extra. I mean, that was a tough team without him. With him, he brings an extra toughness to the offensive side of the ball that makes them, they were the reason I picked them to win the Super Bowl before the season started, and they're the reason he's one of the reasons I still feel good about that pick right now.
Well, I think he's an in-your-face kind of guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he got into the Carolina defense's head. I mean, he was fired up. He was in your face. He was mouthing off. He was close to probably getting a ton of penalties. But it's fun to watch, man. I mean, we all, anyone that loves sports loves guys that have passion and love what they do and getting fired up. And Anquan Bolden brings all that to the table.
So the last game of the day, of the weekend, I should say, was San Diego at Denver. That game ended up 24-17. Mm-hmm. But again, San Diego was another team that was shut out for the first 3 quarters of that game. Well,
I mean, the final spread went off 8.5. So for anyone that took San Diego, you're a winner.
Backdoor cover.
Backdoor cover, absolutely. Another game that was just ho-hum for Peyton Manning. I think that it was a good warm-up for him. I think that, no Sean Moreno, Monte Ball, they're going to have to step up this week. I think New England's going to be as prepared as they've ever been to defend Peyton Manning, and I think that the running backs are going to need to have guys running for 125 to 150 yards to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, before we jump into the Denver Patriots game, I just want to say one last thing about San Diego. They allowed Ken Wisenhunt to interview for head coaching jobs while they were preparing for this game. And it's something that came up after we had our podcast last week, so we didn't really get to talk about it on the podcast last week. But I thought that was a crazy thing even when I was seeing it. You got a guy preparing for a playoff game as your offensive coordinator. You're going on a job interview. It's one of the most intense things you could ever prepare yourself for mentally. And you have to be in the right frame of mind, and you're thinking about better opportunities. And do I want to play? I think he got multiple offers. He could have gone to Detroit. He could have gone to Tennessee. And he's got all these things he's weighing on his plate while he's trying to prepare to go up against the Denver Broncos. And that offense had a horrible game plan. They laid a complete egg. Danny Woodhead was the leading rusher, 9 carries, 29 yards. This is a Denver team you have to run the ball against because, A, you want to keep Peyton Manning off the field, and B, you can run on them. They're a defense that you can run the ball on, and they didn't do it. Instead, Rivers went back there, threw 27 times, only for 217 yards. They put way too much of the pressure on him. I thought, Ryan Matthews had been one of the hottest players in football going into this game. Do you have any explanation for that game plan?
No, I mean, I think they were unprepared. I think Rivers needed to settle down. Like we opened up with Breeze, Rivers didn't look right in the first half, and then he finally got a couple of long balls to Keenan Allen, who is a stud. I mean, the guy is just a stud.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I got a lot of feedback from last podcast was Vinny's declaration that Keenan Allen was as talented as Calvin Johnson, whereas I still think he's crazy for saying that. Keenan Allen definitely had his back this week. 6 catches, 142 yards.
Impressive.
But they didn't throw him the ball in the first half.
Nope.
That's another thing. The second half, the fourth quarter, he's dominating. They can't cover him. And part of it was there were some injuries in the Denver secondary that contributed to that late in that game. But, I mean, he's a beast. He is. He's a very good player.
Defensively, San Diego held him in check. Right. Defensively, San Diego did it.
For the third time this year. Yeah. Maybe there's a blueprint there. So, on to the AFC Championship game that's coming up this week. First of all, if we had set up at the beginning of this year, if I said bet your life on the last 4 teams that are going to be left at the beginning of this year, you think you would have come up with these 4 teams?
It's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback, but definitely in the AFC, I definitely would have come up with New England and Denver. In the NFC, I'm not sure.
Could have had Atlanta in there. Obviously, that didn't work out. You could have made a pick for New Orleans.
Green Bay would have been someone that I would have probably had in there.
Yeah, I mean, these were my two teams. Before the season started, I had a San Francisco-Denver Super Bowl. I don't make me look like a genius, but really I was just playing it safe, and these teams have proved me correct. But it's really going to be an exciting weekend of football. I'm very excited about it. With New England going to Denver, how do you see this one playing out?
Well, I'm not going to change now. You know, I mean, the listeners will now know if they didn't listen to the last podcast. I'm a huge New England fan. I think that this game is probably a low-scoring game. I think there's going to be a lot of defensive minds at work here, and I think that this game is going to be won by less than a touchdown. What do we have the opening line at? I think we have Denver favored at 5.5. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's not the opening line. That's this evening's line. I think it's been all over the place. I know at one point it was 4.5, and I think it opened even higher. I think it opened at 6, and then it was down to 4.5. Now it's at 5.5. It's been moving around quite a bit, but yeah, right now it's 5.5. So, assuming that we get to kick off and that's the line, how do you see this one breaking down? You're all over New England?
That line is exactly where I would think the line should be too. I think that Denver, with the weapons that it has outside of the quarterbacks, are a slight favorite, and they're at home, so the line should be about 5. So if that's the line, that means that the odds makers are making a really tough line for everyone to bet. I would still be taking New England. I would even be taking New England outright because I think that Tom Brady is just a notch better than Peyton Manning. I think Bill Belichick's just a notch above the rest. And I think that LeGarrette Blount is just a beast. And I mean, Julian Edelman's the new Wes Welker on that team. So they each have a Wes Welker. So I think it's going to be a showdown for the ages. I'm not expecting them to hit the total. The totals are anywhere from 55 to 57 right now. I'm expecting that game to be maybe in the high 30s, low 40s. I'm expecting a real defensive presence. I mean, if you're Denver or you're New England, what are you preparing for? Preparing for Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. So that's about it. There may be a few other nuances. We can't let LeGarrette Blount go nuts. We can't let Eric Decker be open on every other play. But, I mean, you're preparing for what's Peyton and what's Tom going to do, and this is going to be a showdown for the ages.
So these two teams played in Week 12 at Foxborough. It always seems like Peyton Manning's going to Foxborough in these matchups, but he finally gets one at home this year. Denver jumps out to a 24-0 halftime lead.
I remember the game well.
The first touchdown was a return touchdown by Von Miller. He's not playing in this game. He was one of the big factors in this game. Peyton did not have a good game the first time these two guys matched up. And Brady ended up finishing with pretty phenomenal stats. I could also make an argument that New England's reinvented themselves even since this game. Not often you hear a team that's 8-3 reinventing themselves at that point in the season, but I think if you break it down, that's kind of what we've seen out of this team. Can you look at that game where the Patriots ended up winning, coming back in overtime, winning 34-31? Brady has the huge comeback. First of all, is that still in Denver's head? And is there a difference when they're playing at home for the Broncos? Do you see a big difference there? And can you take anything from this previous game, or do you wipe the slate clean?
Well, they've played a ton before, and they know each other well, so I think you could probably wipe the slate clean. But the takeaway for Denver is that no lead is big enough. When you're up 24-0 on someone's home turf, that's huge. New England came in. Imagine what Belichick said at halftime. New England came out and they just started firing away right away and came back, almost immediately. And I don't think that you can prepare for Belichick. He's always moving. He's always thinking. He's always changing. I don't think you can prepare for his style of play, but he can prepare for you. And Tom Brady just has the moxie of somebody that we've never seen before in professional sports. Nothing bothers him. He doesn't care how bad his teammates are. He's going to build them up, and he's going to make something out of them, and that's what he's done. Yeah,
I mean, it's hard to argue against Brady. I don't think the talent around him dictates this type of season that they've had. And he started off with a rough start. First 6 games were not great for Brady, especially statistically, but they keep finding a way to get it done. One quick thing, not to ruin your man crush on LeGarrette Blount, which is in full blossom right now, But no Sean Moreno last time these two teams played, 37 carries, 224 yards, and a touchdown. They're going to let him run the ball. And Belichick's going to take away Peyton Manning. That's what he did last time in this matchup. He made it really difficult for Peyton. They're going to sit back in coverage. They're going to make Denver run the ball. I expect Moreno to have a big day, and we'll get to that a little more in our prop bets, but I expect Moreno to have another big day. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't just wear him out.
For them to win, he's going to have a huge day. I think Peyton's made it pretty clear he prefers no Sean Moreno over Monte Ball, although Monte Ball did have his last couple of games have been pretty good. Monte Ball puts the ball on the ground, Peyton takes it personally. So no Sean Moreno will be the featured back in this game, and I don't know if he'll repeat it 200 yards, but I can see him getting 100 and 100 and a quarter.
All right, so you have 250 Jägermeisters that you can bet on this game. Throwing that out there. You can bet the over-under, you can bet the money line, you can bet the regular line. Where are you putting your Jägermeisters?
I'm going to put it under 56 points.
The whole thing, you're going under. That's the safest bet to you.
Yeah, I just don't see it. I think the public will be on the idea that it's going to be an over, that it's going to be a shootout. I think that, the safe bet will be that special teams will be especially informed to make sure that punt return and kickoff returns are handled correctly. I don't think you're going to see any freebie points in the game. I think it's going to be back and forth field goals, maybe a few breakaways here and there, maybe a few bombs here and there, but I don't think that we will be anywhere near close to 56, 57 points.
So if you had to pick a prediction for a final score, what's your prediction?
I would probably look at something along the lines of 24-21 New England.
That's exactly what I had in my head as well, so strange how that worked out. That's my prediction for a score, too, 24-21 New England. I've just seen Peyton Manning find a way to lose these games too many times for me to put my money there. I can't see giving up the 5.5 points, and I actually like that money line. I think if you're going to pay me 2-1, if Denver and New England play this game 10 times, there's no way you can convince me that New England wouldn't win 5 of them. And if you're going to pay me to take those odds, I'll take them all day long. So
you have history on your side.
Yeah, 10-4. Brady's 10-4 in these matchups against Peyton. And I you love Tom Brady. I think it's Belichick. I think. Just real quick on this little side note, the Detroit Lions just hired Jim Caldwell to be their next head coach. Did I miss something there? Did somebody think he did a good job when he was with the Indianapolis Colts?
No, I mean, if I remember correctly, he cost them their perfect season. Right?
Yeah, well, on purpose. He basically gave the Jets a playoff spot, which was awesome. They ended up making the AFC Championship game, and he ruined their whole thing. That to me is a crazy hire. Detroit is one of the more poorly run franchises in sports. They have a ton of talent, and I'd be willing to bet my left arm to $1 that Detroit does not win a playoff game next year with Jim Caldwell as the head coach.
Probably correct.
Moving on to the afternoon game, 49ers at the Seahawks. Also a rematch. These guys played twice in the regular season. What do you make of this game going into it?
This is a tough one for me. I think that, the line is set at 3.5. So what we're saying here is that at home, where Seattle has dominated, that they're barely a field goal favorite. It's tough for me. I really like the 49ers in this game. I think that the Seattle, its defense is as good as we think. It is legendary. We talked about how good is this defense. It may be a legendary defense. The problem is that the game's not going to end 3-0. And it's been pretty clear here that Seattle has receiving problems, and the Niners don't. The Niners have 3 or 4 real options. Gore is a legit running back. He's not Marshawn Lynch, but he's a legit running back. The way I see this game going, the total they have is 39.5. I actually think this is going to go over. I think we're going to see over 40 points, and I see the 49ers winning this game. In fact, I actually think the 49ers might win by double digits.
And that's mostly because of your lack of confidence in the Seattle offense?
I don't know who would catch the ball. I don't know who he's going to throw to. I don't know who's going to catch the ball. I think that, I mean, the only shot they have maybe is if Marshawn Lynch goes off for 200 and scores 3 touchdowns.
He did have decent games against them this year. I think one he ran for about 70, one he ran for about 90. I don't think anyone's running for 200 yards against San Francisco 49ers.
I don't
defense.
either. That's why I don't give them a shot. I think the 49ers in an upset outright, and I think that to do it, they're going to have some fun putting up some points.
So here's my argument against that. And I know, first of all, if this game goes over, the 49ers win. I think that I would say I feel strongly about. So if you take Colin Kaepernick's 4 worst games as a pro, 2 of them took place in Seattle. That's a really tough place to play, and I'm not in love with Kaepernick. I think he's got a great situation. I think he's got a ton of talent around him, awesome offensive line, great running back, great head coach, very good receiving core. I think he has to prove something to me. I do think there's a chance this game could end up being like 6-3. That wouldn't necessarily surprise me. These teams know each other. They played 2 other times this year. They played 2 times last year. I just don't. You said it's going to go over. Tell me where those points are coming from.
I think Gore rushes for 2 touchdowns. I think Crabtree, Bolden, each grab a touchdown. I think you may see 28 points put up by San Francisco.
So what's your
you might even see Vernon Davis in the action.
What's your final prediction for a score for this game?
I think you're looking at something along the lines of like maybe 28-17.
28-17.
Yeah.
So that would make your Super Bowl New England, San Francisco.
You would.
Is that the best matchup? Is that the one that
define best matchup?
Is that the one you want to see?
I ultimately would like to see New England and Denver play again. But
here's the thing. I don't think what's so strange about this is that you could make a very solid argument that Seattle's been the best team in football all year. But I think if you ask 10 people on the street who didn't have an allegiance in this game one way or another, which game they'd most like to see in the Super Bowl, I think almost all of them would say either Denver, San Francisco, or New England, San Francisco.
100%. And the reason why primarily is before we were equipped with all of the vast stations that we can buy to watch these games, that, growing up, we watched, the Giants, the Jets, and we would watch Dallas and the 49ers all on the national stations. So that's why a lot of people in the tri-state area are Dallas fans or 49er fans, and we don't hold it against them because, they grew up watching those teams just as we did the Jets and the Giants. I think the best one for ratings would probably be Denver, San Francisco. I think that the world wants Peyton Manning to win. I think that Brady and Belichick, with the whole Spygate thing and so forth, have become kind of the evil empire over there.
And we've seen it before. A lot.
We've seen it before. I mean, just think, we've talked about this, off camera here, but or off mic. What if the Giants didn't pull off those 2 victories? We'd be talking about 2 more championships for Brady Belichick. So. I think that everyone would want to see a Denver San Francisco Super Bowl.
And just to recap, last week we talked about how if this game took place between the Patriots and the Broncos, that whoever won this game in terms of the quarterbacks would probably go down as the best quarterback of all time. You still feel that way?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, yes. I think I do, because I think that they're both, Peyton's on a new team. For all intents and purposes, Brady is, reinvented this team, or it's got, all different players from last year. So it in essence is a new team. I think so. I think that, they're older. It's 8 years later, it's 6 years later, it's 10 years later. They're now, 13, 14-year veterans in the league, 15-year veterans in the league. So, yeah, it's, what are the grown-up versions of Peyton and Tom going to do? So I think this may be, barring them playing again in the AFC Championship next year, this may be the game of the ages.
What are your 3 favorite prop bets for this weekend?
I see you printed out several several choices here. Were there any that you liked?
I think there are a few. Brady over on the passing yards to me seems like something that that I like. In the first matchup, he had 34 completions for 344 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, they were coming back in that game. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver jump out to an early lead in this game either. I just think the home field advantage, basically preparing for this game, all year. This is the game that Denver's been waiting for all year. I wouldn't be surprised to see them jump out early and have the Patriots have to come back again. I like Brady over 270 yards. I also like LeGarrette Blount to be under 78.5 yards rushing. I don't mean to ruin your man crush again, but I think Denver.
Well, if Vereen or Ridley is the choice of or the flavor of the week, then you could see him for 8 rushes for 30 yards. It wouldn't surprise me, but I think Belichick will be using him. I do see here, they got Julian Edelman over under 88.5 yards. I'd take the over on that. I just think that Julian Edelman is the third down guy. He's the guy that is gonna be probably gonna get an extra 10 passes this game because it's gonna be third and short often probably. So I like Julian Edelman to over.
He did go 9 for 110 and 2 touchdowns in the first matchup. But again, the biggest thing with the Blunt thing too is, he's not a guy who's used to carrying the workload like he did last week, and he may be sore. He may have taken some hits, and
he's young.
Vereen and those other guys may just have fresher legs. He is young, but I mean, I don't trust Belichick to use Blunt as much as he might need to gain 78 yards. So that's my biggest concern with that one, and that's why I chose the under there. Anything else that stood out to you?
Here's one: Demaryius Thomas over under 5.5 receptions. I think that's got to be over. I think that for Denver to win, I mean, he's got to catch the ball 6 or more times.
So I went back and looked at it for the entire season. They played 17 games now, including their playoff game. He only went over 5.5 catches 8 times. So in 17 games, so a little less than 50%. He did score a touchdown in 9 of those games. So a little bit over 50%, which is another it's another over-under bet is will he catch a touchdown in the game, another prop bet. Because those are so close and because there's so many weapons on that offense, I'm afraid to take that bet with the Demaryius Thomas. I wanted to lay that one off. I did like Noshawn Moreno over 78.5 yards because that's got to be priority one. You can run on this New England defense. They're without Vince Wilfork. They're without Gerard Mayo. The secret to beating this team, the teams that have beaten the Patriots in these kind of games in the past are the ones that out-physical them. Run the ball and rush the quarterback. Denver's got to focus on those things to win this game. I like Noshawn Moreno over 78.5 yards.
Yeah, one of the prop bets is will Frank Gore score a touchdown? I think he has to. I think Frank Gore has to.
All right. Any other prop bets that stand out to you?
Not a big prop bet guy. There's people that they'll bet on who will score the first touchdown or what kind of play will the first touchdown be or will the coin toss land on heads or tails or will the young lady or young man singing the national anthem go over or under 2.5 minutes? That stuff doesn't do anything for me.
All right. Well,
it's fun to talk about, though. Thanks for bringing those up.
The 250 Jägermeisters that you have to bet on the 49ers-Seahawks game, are you betting that on the 49ers money line, the 49ers line, the over? What's your best bet?
I think the smartest bet would be to take the Niners with the points. I mean, I think that's probably the smartest bet. Me saying that they're going to go over 39.5 is just my feeling on how the game will play. I don't think that Seattle can win this game. So I think that the smartest play would be to take San Francisco. They should win. And if they don't, if it's within a field goal, you're going to win anyway.
I'm taking both dogs to the money lines this weekend. That's what I'm going to take. That's where I'm putting my Jägermeisters. I just think that I think one of them will definitely win. And I think there's a chance that both of them will win. I think that's a good place.
I think it's a real possibility. I think it's a real possibility that you have a New England, San Francisco Super Bowl, and I think it'll be fantastic.
All right. So the last thing that we wanted to talk about here on Passionately Moderate this week was there was a big shakeup with the Giants. Kevin Gilbride had been with Coughlin in one capacity or another the entire time he's been with the Giants, also in Jacksonville. He retires. Some speculation there whether that was forced or not. I tend to think he really just retired. Not saying that they would not have forced him out anyway, but I don't even think they had the opportunity to do that. I think Gilbride was just done.
He's had plenty of successes where he doesn't need to fake a retirement.
I would concur. So the Giants went out and they interviewed 4 candidates. A lot of people thought they would go with Sullivan, who had been there before in the past, Mike Sullivan. That's kind of the way I expected them to go. Sullivan had been with the Giants, Coughlin guy, and they interviewed him, so I thought they were interested. And then in a surprise move this week, they hired Ben McAdoo, who I would be lying if I said I knew who this guy was until the Giants interviewed him. I didn't. But I've spent a lot of time reading everything I could over the last 24 hours about this guy and what did it mean to the Giants, how he got here. 36 years old, was highly sought after in this period of coach hiring that just went on. What's your take on this?
You know, a lot. You know, the first thing is coming over from Green Bay. You've obviously seen how to set a young quarterback up, spread the ball around, how to create receivers. And I think one of the things that, you know, Manning, Brady, Breeze, and Rodgers do well, and Rodgers obviously is who he's worked with over at Green Bay, they create receivers. Guy gets injured, backup's in there, and to the public, you don't see any fall off. And that's something that, you know, Eli has struggled with, the Giants have struggled with. The Giants have a lot of injuries on that line. But one thing that Eli was unable to do successfully this year, and I know it frustrated you the most, especially Hakeem Nicks, is spread the ball around to the different receivers, get everybody involved, and you know, make it a guessing game who you're going to throw the ball to. So I think that, you know, from everything that I've read too, I also didn't know Ben McAdoo either, but from everything that I've read about what he's done with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers and that offense, I'm actually excited for next year.
Yeah, I think it's a great hire, and I do support it. I'm just very surprised because,
well, people don't like change.
But here's the thing: Coughlin, it always seems to me like a guy who doesn't really like change. And the safe thing to do here would have been to hire a guy who ran a similar offense or similar style to Gilbride. And this is a real statement hire, I think, to the players, to the team, and really to Eli Manning, because one of the things I did read today was Graham Harrell. I don't know if you remember him from his days in college. Huge college career. Backup quarterback in Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers, working with McAdoo. And one of the things that he came out and said was that he was really, really hard on them when it came to the fundamentals and the footwork. And when he came in, Rodgers had already had a ton of success when he got there or not when he got there, but when he became the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. And he was a stickler for the fundamentals. And no matter how much success Rodgers had, he wrote him to get better, and he was a perfectionist about it. And he said he thought he was going to be really hard on Eli. He thought he was going to be really demanding. And they run a West Coast offense. You know, that it's that traditional, go back to Bill Walsh, West Coast offense. It's high percentage passes, let your playmakers make plays, not a bunch of balls down the field. And it's exactly the opposite, basically, of what the offensive philosophy has been for the Giants for the last 5 or 6 years, which is run the ball, throw it over the top, down the field, and try to make a big play. Try to get those yards through the air with the ball.
And they've had success. I mean, Victor Cruz, when he's open, he's open. When he's gone, he's gone. So, you know, the old way worked. But I mean, I just think we got to talk about Hakeem Nicks for a minute and what happened this year with Hakeem Nicks. What happened?
He lost a step, and I don't know whether that's a concentration thing, an effort thing, or a physical ability thing. But he never had separation at any point, and he's not at the. He's actually. The receiver he reminds me most of in terms of his build, his talent, and everything else is Anquan Boldin. And Anquan Boldin, what makes him so special, we talked about it earlier, is that in spite of the fact that he doesn't get great separation with his speed, because he's not a fast receiver anymore at this stage of his career, he creates separation by being smarter than the other players, by outworking them, by being more physical. And Nicks has all the traits to be able to be that kind of guy. His head was not in the game this year. And he had 0 touchdowns as a result, and the team really suffered. But I still blame Gilbride, because the problem that you have here with this Giants team is this offensive line was really bad. Will Beatty, you just gave him all this money, allowed 14 sacks on the season. You had injuries in the middle of the line. Guys never recovered. Boss that they brought in from the 49ers a couple years ago has been nothing but a bust. Snee, who's been the anchor of that offensive line through both Super Bowl runs, doesn't play a single down this year. Now, he's hoping to come back because he feels good after the 4 surgeries that he's had, but he's 32 years old going into next year. Without him, though, they couldn't get their assignments right. I mean, that offensive line was a debacle. It didn't matter who was running the ball or anything else. They couldn't get anything going. And Gilbride never switched up the play calling. You cannot have Eli step back there in 5 and 7-step drops, looking down the field 30 or 40 yards to try to find bombs because there's no time to do that. And if he would have made the kind of adjustment that I think you're going to see from McAdoo when he comes in there, which is short passes, as good as Victor Cruz is catching the deep ball, he's just as good at making things happen with the ball once it's in his hands. If they just switched to a short passing game, I think they would have been highly effective, or at least much more effective than they were letting Eli get back there and just get creamed.
So does Nix come back? Everything I'm hearing is he's not coming back.
My projection for him going into the season was that he would have, if he had a decent season like he has the last couple of years, that he'd be a 5-year, $40 million guy in the free agency market. How can you give a guy that hasn't caught a touchdown pass in over 20 weeks, 20 NFL weeks, 0 touchdown passes this year? How can you give a guy like that kind of money? I don't see it happening. To me, his best bet is to sign a 1-year deal with the Giants, prove that he's worth something, and then get more money on either from the Giants or from somebody else. And I think maybe he moves on after this year coming up. Maybe Ruben Randall steps up into that role. But maybe the new offensive coordinator is something that he's excited about. I don't know. I can't see a scenario for him where he gets to go to a contending team who's going to pay him more than the Giants are willing to pay him. If he wants to go play for the Raiders, he can get more money. If he wants to go play in Oakland, he can get more money. Kevin Boss did that. Look how well that worked out for him. He wasn't there very long. Randy Moss went there and his career got derailed. If you want to go to Oakland, they'll pay you. But, if you want to go to, I can't even think of another team that's like that, but, there are bad teams that I'm sure would overpay for Hakeem Nicks. Does that what he wants to do?
Jacksonville.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that being that kind of thing. I think he stays in New York for one more year, probably signs like a 1-year, $5 million deal, and he proves that he's got something left. Because otherwise, I just can't see giving him a long-term deal anymore. I haven't seen the skill sets now for a year and a half that would allow me to pay him that kind of money.
Is Ruben Randall worth anything? Is he the guy? Is he the number 2 receiver in New York if Nix doesn't come back?
I think he's number 1 receiver talent, and you've seen it in flashes. He is a very talented kid. He was a very talented coming out of LSU. A lot of people thought he was going to be an end of the first round pick. The Giants picked him up in the second round. He's inconsistent. The consistency just has not been there. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing. I don't know if it's a play calling thing. I don't know if it's a maturity thing on his part. But as far as talent goes, there's no reason why he can't be as good or better than what Nix was. And you saw the flashes from Jernigan in the last 3 games. If that kid can stay healthy, and Cruz can be an outside guy for you, you can get Jernigan going in the slot. You have Randall on the other side. They can survive without Hakeem Nicks, and they can pick up another wide receiver in the draft. They've shown an ability to be able to draft decent receivers. But I think for Nicks and for the Giants, the best fit is still here for him.
I think so. If I'm Ben McAdoo, you got to shore up the line. You brought that up, and that's the number one thing. We can't have Eli getting sacked all over the place. But one of the things that was really alarming for me, and I've always been a tough critic of Eli. I've praised him where he's deserved it, but I've always been tough on him. These interceptions, it looked like half the time Eli was just throwing the ball to the other team, and it looked like half the time that the receivers had never learned the routes.
Right.
I think that we need a lot of time spent on game management, time management, the playbook. Good luck.
Well, I think Eli never recovered from A, not having Chris Snee in there, who has been there his whole career, and B, from that Dallas game. So if they go back to the first year of the first game of the season, looked like the Giants' offense was going to be really solid. They had a great game. They ended up losing that game, but they scored points. They never scored that many points again.
Right. And then the second time they played Dallas, they were in the game. They only lost by, a field goal?
3, it was like 24-21. I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think the Giants are 2 offensive linemen away from being a playoff team again. Although maybe it's not crazy because they did finish the season 7-3 after an 0-6 start. But if you get Snee back and he has anything left to give you for another year or two, and you can get one more offensive lineman in there, if you can Pugh looked like a good player to me. You can move him inside. You can put hopefully Beatty. You can move maybe to the right side. You can pick up a left tackle in the draft or through free agency. Move Booth down to center. I like the way that offensive line could recover. It wouldn't surprise me. So I don't think they're that far away because I think that enables you to start running the ball. I like what Andre Brown did when he came back from injury. Hopefully he can stay healthy. They need more depth at running back. You're not going to get
that's
away
the last piece of it for me is Andre Brown our running back for 2014.
If he's healthy, he is one of the top 20 backs in the NFL. But that's a big if, right? I mean, he has never proven that he can do it. He was hurt in college. He was hurt with the Giants. He's been hurt. So I don't know. I know that David Wilson may never play again. So that's a real big blow. First of all, if we lose a first-round draft pick, clearly he's shown he can't be the bell cow back there. He's not going to be able to stay healthy. They're going to have to pick somebody else up. But the one thing I'll say about the NFL is that running backs appear to be the one position where there's not a shortage of talent. You can find those guys out there either later in the draft or...
There's a lot of good college running backs out there.
You know, if you can open up holes, you'll be able to find a guy who can run through them. And so I'm optimistic there. They do have a lot of free agents they got to bring back. They have to bring back Tuck. But I was looking at the numbers for the salary cap today, and I think they have room to retain a lot of these guys. I think the defense looks solid. Probably going to lose Linval Joseph on the defensive line. But, you know, sticking to the hire of McAdoo, I like this. The biggest thing I like about it is the signal it sends to the rest of the team from Coughlin, which is, you know, I'm not stuck in my ways of doing things. I'm not stuck in what didn't work. If it didn't work, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do something radical to fix it. I'm going to run an offense I've never run before. I'm going to let this guy come in here 36 years old and pound you guys into the ground, a new face, new blood, you know, no more of that comfort of, you know, hey, Gilbride's been my guy since my whole career as Eli Manning for 10 years. You got a new guy in here, you have to prove something. You guys got to come in and prove something to a new guy. I think that stuff's awesome. You know, I think I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a different tone in camp. They got rid of tight end coach Mike Pope, who's been there since as long as I can remember, even before Coughlin got there. They're really shaking things up on the offensive side of the ball. And when you have an offense that played as badly as this offense did this year with the talent that we expected them to have, I mean, I thought they were going to have a great offense going into the season. You know, tons of top fantasy picks and everything else. Nix, Cruz, Wilson, these guys are going top of the draft. You know, I love that they shook it up like this, and I love this hire, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was necessary, and you know, Coughlin is going to stand by his man, and I think that as long as the team sees that Eli is bought in, then I think that everyone else will buy in, and I think that we could have some good things to come here next year.
Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up?
You know, Mark, why don't you share with everybody, you know, the goal behind our podcast meeting here? You know, I think people have seen the last podcast that came out a week ago. It did get quite a bit of attention. We've got over 100 views of the podcast. So why don't you share with everybody what the intent of the podcasts are?
Well, I think really just to help break down for people what they're going to see in these matchups and expand our audience as much as possible. They can check us out on Twitter at PassionatelyMod or on Facebook, and any kind of support they can give us in terms of getting more listeners would be great. But I think our biggest goal here is just to bring a new perspective to our audience in terms of sticking to the facts to make our points, having opinions that are based on those facts, and getting out to as many people as possible.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me, and good night, everybody.
All right. See you next week.